Hello, fellow gamers, and welcome to the Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. Today we have a very exciting episode for you all as we will be deep diving God of War Ragnarok. Before we start that, though, we would like to ask you all to take a moment to rate our show 5 stars and leave a written review if your podcast app allows. And if you like what we do and want extra content, you can sign up on Patreon to get bonus episodes while helping support our show. You can check it all out at multiplayersquad.com. And you can also follow us on socials everywhere at MultiplayerPod. I am your host, Paul, and here with me, death can have him when it earns him. It's Josh.
Oh, it's one of my favorite lines.
It's a great one.
It was so, dude, they showed that off in the trailer, that part of the game. I was just like, yes.
Very nice. And here joining me and Josh, he looks like a calm and reasonable person. Are you a calm and reasonable person? It's Michael.
I think I am a calm and reasonable person, but maybe there's some things underneath that just haven't come out yet.
It could be. All right, so I did want to say here at the top of the show that as we cover God of War Ragnarok, we are going to be sharing spoilers from the previous God of War entries. So all the games that came before are fair game. And as far as Ragnarok goes, we are only initially going to talk about the opening hour of the game. So being that it's about a 22 hour campaign, we are going to talk about the opening hour just so we can talk about it on the show. And then later we will give you a major spoilers warning, and that's when we'll talk about endgame reveals. All right. Since we have so much to talk about, we're not going to dilly-dally. We're not going to go over any kind of housekeeping today. It's time, boys. Let's hop on our wolf sled and make final preparations for the end of the world while deep diving God of War Ragnarok.
Oh, that music was almost as epic as Bear McCreary's score for this game.
Oh, and you better believe we're going to talk about that music today. All right, so starting off, in case you're living under a rock and don't know anything about God of War, here's the description of Ragnarok according to Sony. From Santa Monica Studios comes the sequel to the critically acclaimed God of War 2018. Join Kratos and Atreus on a mythic journey for answers before Ragnarok arrives. Together, father and son must put everything on the line as they journey to each of the 9 realms. Throughout stunning mythological landscapes, they'll face fearsome enemies, from Norse gods to wild beasts, as they prepare for the showdown of their lives. Armed with his trustworthy weapons of war, including the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos, Kratos' deadly skills will be tested like never before as he fights to protect his family. A host of new abilities for him and Atreus also await, leaving room for fluid, expressive, and customizable combat in this epic and unflinching tale. All right, so I think it's fair to say that God of War Ragnarok is one of the most highly anticipated games that we've done a deep dive for, probably second only to Cyberpunk 2077. And for anyone out there who does not know, Ragnarok is actually the 9th entry in the God of War series, and Ragnarok sold over 5 million units in the first week, making it the fastest selling first-party game in PlayStation history.
Wow.
Now, Josh, you and I did a deep dive of God of War 2018, and we have it placed number 2 on our overall leaderboard. It currently sits only behind Red Dead Redemption 2. What is it about God of War that makes it so special?
Oh, man. How long do we have?
That's an hour for just this part.
Yeah. I mean, to keep it simple, it does everything that multiple games do on their own and puts it all together in a complete package. So your gameplay aspect is phenomenal. The combat in God of War is top notch. It is fun. It's engaging. It's in depth. You're good to go. The characters are explained. You care about them. There's backstory to them. They have a lot of depth to them, so they nail the characters. The story, you become insanely invested in the story that the characters are going through. Like you actually care, and it's a well-written plot. So what makes God of War incredible is that it takes all of these different gameplay elements and it combines them into an almost perfect mishmash of a lot of those different elements. That's the easiest, simplest way I can put it.
I can say it even simpler. I can just say it's severely underrated on our leaderboard.
I mean, to be fair, God of War is number one for me. It was Paul that I conceded Red Dead Redemption 2 to the number one spot.
Well, Michael also did the deep dive on Red Dead and agreed at putting it number one at the time. So,
Michael, Michael is guilty.
Yeah, Michael is guilty here.
Guilty!
I had not played God of War, but I have now played God of War 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of recency bias here, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll talk about it.
Ourselves.
Yeah. Josh is absolutely right. Marriage of story and gameplay. I don't think that God of War 2018 is like the best story ever told in video games, but it's a story with a combat. You put it all together. It's the perfect length where it just kind of leaves you wanting more. Like some people fizzle out on longer games like Red Dead Redemption 2. But God of War 2018 just drops you off 20 years later in Kratos' life, and you just have a million questions. Like, who is this woman Kratos was married to? Why is his relationship so strained with his son? What's going on? And the story is told with so much nuance and care. You can really feel the passion in every scene, every line of dialogue. Josh and I think we both said God of War 2018 is a perfect game. Like, it's in that very small pantheon, no pun intended, of perfect games. I think the other thing that stands out to me is that the 2018 game has so many oh crap moments, which I know we talked about on the deep dive, but I mean, it covers things from like cutting off Mimir's head, summoning the world serpent for the first time, the entire scene where you have Kratos carrying Atreus unconscious back to Freya's hut, and you don't know if he's going to survive or not. You've got all the stuff with Baldur trying to choke out his mom, Freya. I mean, to the reveal of Atreus being the Norse god Loki. Like, there's so many individual moments that stand out as being all-time greats. I mean, there's nothing more you can ask for out of God of War. And so here we're finally getting the follow-up, which is Ragnarok. Michael, you already mentioned here that you had not previously played God of War. You never played any of the entries other than a couple hours of 2018 before fizzling out. Now, here in the last 2 weeks, I believe, you blazed through all of Ragnarok first as your first God of War game. You finished it, you went back, you ended up playing all of 2018 as well. So what's it been like to eat, drink, and breathe God of War for the first time?
It was incredible. I'd actually played a little bit of God of War 3 back in 2008 or something like that. But yeah, it was interesting. I did almost 100% complete Ragnarok. I have done literally everything you can do in the game, with exception of two things that I would consider kind of spoilers, so I might bring them up later on. But it was incredible. Just going back and understanding the character. That being said, I absolutely am a preposterous, obtuse idiot by not listening to Josh and Paul when they ceaselessly told me to stop everything that I was doing and play God of War 2018, because I did play these in the wrong order. I didn't know. Now, if I'd have known I was going to blaze through 100 hours of God of War in a week or in 2 weeks, I would have played 2018 and then played Ragnarok, which, listen to me out there, you have to do it that way. I know you're excited about the newer entry. Maybe the graphics are a little bit updated and some of the things we talk about with combat later on, not to spoil later in the episode, but story-wise, it's like watching Star Wars out of order. When you watch the original trilogy from the 1970s and 80s, you're meant to understand Darth Vader as this big, bad, evil, literally faceless entity of just no remorse, just of cruelty. And then you go back and you watch the trilogies, the prequels, and you understand more about Anakin, and you get more of his, his personality and his tragic story and stuff like that. You have to play the story in the order it was meant to be revealed, because 2018 sets up so many things for Ragnarok that are just great payoffs, and I'm really sad I did it that way. That being said, I'm so happy I've done this, and I want to play through them all again.
So a good question for Michael right now is, I mean, I agree. If you haven't played 2018's God of War and you're amped about Ragnarok, do yourself a favor. You're not missing anything. Play 2018 first and then play Ragnarok. It will pay off in spades for you. But I know there's people out there that have gone, listen, I don't have the time. I have kids or whatever, but I'm super interested in Ragnarok. Can I just play Ragnarok on its own and have it be rewarding?
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing is that's what we aim to cover today, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So to kind of bridge the gap from 2018 to Ragnarok, we do have a time jump of 3 years in the story. Atreus is no longer the little turd that you might remember from 2018.
Now he's a teenage turd.
He is now a strapping young man. I really love comparing the opening of 2018 to the opening of Ragnarok because it really highlights the time jump. In the beginning of 2018, you first take out Atreus to teach him how to hunt. And in the beginning of Ragnarok, Kratos is just calmly whittling away more arrows for Atreus, and Atreus walks in carrying a giant buck on his shoulders. Like, he is no longer the little prepubescent, tween. He's now a young man. So the story of Ragnarok is not quite as simple or as clean as 2018, where you're just trying to spend the entire game going to the highest mountain in all the realms to spread Faye's ashes. But in the beginning of Ragnarok, we find out that Freya has still been hunting down Kratos, trying to kill him over the last 3 years. We also find out that Atreus has been sneaking off at night with Sindri to study all of the giants' shrines and also trying to find out what's going on with the Norse god of war Tyr. Can we find out where he is? Is he still alive? Is he dead? What's going on? And Atreus is also learning more about his giant powers, since we of course know that he is half god and also half giant. So one night when Kratos and Atreus are home near the beginning of Ragnarok, they're getting ready to go to bed, and we see what was shown at the very end of the 2018 entry, where the home is kind of like hit by lightning. You hear thunder everywhere, and they open the door, and there's Fat Thor standing outside Kratos' door holding Mjolnir. And of course, you just kind of expect an immediate fight, because in 2018, you did kill Thor's sons. You also killed his half-brother Balder. But Michael, do you want to tell us, what happens at this point when you start talking to Thor?
So essentially, the whole part with Thor is you can kind of see that Thor is kind of being a puppet of Odin's wishes and Odin's wills and stuff. So the point of the fight with Thor is, first of all, it's pretty cool because you're literally flying through all the realms, crashing through things, destroying landscape around you, while Atreus is back in the cabin talking to Odin, and that's like the whole point of what's going on here, is Odin is trying to distract the heck out of Kratos by using Thor in order to talk to Atreus, because Atreus is kind of the key to what he is looking to do. Is that kind of where we're wanting to go there?
Yeah, I just want to, I'll rewind just a little bit before that point, because everybody thinks you're fighting Thor right away, kind of like you fight Balder right away in 2018. But the game kind of throws a twist because Thor basically says, "Can I come in? I brought mead." And so there's this neat little moment where you go like, "Wait, we're not fighting?"
Like, just our house guest.
Yeah.
That's right.
Then so it's this very tense moment, which I really enjoyed, where Thor comes in. You can tell, Kratos does not trust him, what's happening. He pours the drink. You can still tell that there's mistrust. The tension just keeps building and building. Odin shows up, which I thought was super cool that they did this so early in the game, because it was kind of like, we know what everybody expects, so we're going to give it to you right away and show you that there's much more that's going to happen in this game than just the showdown with Thor and Odin. And then it does transition into the fight. Odin wants Kratos to basically just leave things alone. He can live peacefully. Just don't, stop looking for tears. Stop doing this stuff. And it sounds like, well, I mean, sure. And then Kratos is just like, no.
One word answer.
Yeah. And then the fight happens. So
yeah. And it really does echo back to when Balder knocks on the door at the beginning of the 2018 game, and it goes right into a fight. And, it's kind of one of those things. I think Thor says something along the lines of, "You won't invite a stranger into your home with mead," something along those lines. And you're like, well, we know a fight's coming, though. We know this is happening, to Josh's point. And it's really interesting to see the slow build. It's kind of like when you slowly pick on that violin, that, and you know it's coming. When is it going to break?
Yeah, I think this really highlighted a lot of what they do in Ragnarok. It follows a lot of the same template of 2018, but they kind of put a little bit of a twist on it. So the fact that they sit down at the table first, I thought was really cool, because it kind of sets everyone's intentions, or at least what they're saying their intentions are, down on the table. If Thor shows up and they start slugging it out, that would have been epic and it would have been neat. But the fact that they both sit down on opposite sides of the table and start putting the chips down, I thought that was really incredible. And also, when we're talking about things like the little nuances of God of War, I didn't even notice this the first time around, but when Odin first shows up, the first time he mentions Atreus' name, Kratos puts his hand on the Leviathan axe. Like, now that his attention's on my son, I'm ready to protect him.
Right.
And then he finally lets go. And about a minute later, Odin reaches out his hand and places it on Atreus' shoulder. And Kratos does the same thing. So it's like they don't bring attention to those details, but you can tell that they really just sit and think through how would these characters respond here. And you can just pay attention to any section of the screen and you're going to see something interesting that furthers the story. And those little details, I think, really set God of War apart.
I think that's one of the things that shows a good game director to a great game director is having that vision to go through and say, hey, what would these characters actually do? And not just having the story evolve. Like, they could have just had the conversation, but by subtly showing the hand go to the axe twice, you understand that Kratos' most important want here is to keep his son safe, which of course is flowing right from the 2018 game into this game, and we show that that's really there. Atreus is becoming a man, but Kratos still feels very protective of his young man son.
Yeah, and they do such a good job of showing that instead of telling it. Like, Kratos doesn't just say, get my son's name out of your mouth. You just see those little moments where, you know, he responds in a certain way with his body language. And I think that's really fascinating. All right, so yeah, basically Kratos refuses this truce with Odin. And of course, we know with the history of Odin, he's a liar. Mimir and Freya spend all of 2018 telling us never trust a word Odin says. Kratos is willing to trust them, and he just says, no, your offer sounds great, but we're not going to do it. And then Odin says, don't take long to Thor. And then Thor just starts slugging it out with Kratos in what is, in my opinion, the most epic fight of Ragnarok. This is just like, hands down, an incredible fight. Like, what parts of this fight stand out to you guys? What do you want to talk about?
I mean, all of it, to be honest, because this is the big showdown, right? Like in God of War 2018, and we're going to keep referencing that because there's a lot that ties in. It's like this is what builds up some of the payoff for Ragnarok. So,
right.
You know, in 2018, Thor is mentioned a lot, and the you know, his acts of, you know, killing these giants, and he's just this wrecking machine, and he's super powerful. Like, you get glimpses of that, but you get no payoff in God of War 2018. In Ragnarok, you finally are like, I'm fighting Thor. Am I strong enough? Like, is Kratos able to actually take down Thor? And so this fight plays into that, you know, and it is very cinematic. I think it is one of the better fights in the game, to be honest, because you're basically going like, can I do this? You know, this is Thor we're talking about here. So I think that they did a very good job in the fight. I think they did a good job of making you kind of feel reserved almost, because Thor keeps saying, let me see the God of War. Like, let him out.
This is a lesser version of you.
Right. And he keeps saying that. And you kind of feel it, though, right? Like, that's the thing, is you kind of go like, come on, Kratos, like, let loose. But he's not that guy anymore either. And so it's just a perfect conflict for me in the way that they framed it.
I thought that was one of the coolest ways that a game, you know, when you start a game, okay, so you end God of War 2018, you have unlocked all of your abilities on the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos. You've got everything. You're a super god again. But at the beginning of any game, obviously, you have to have something to achieve. So you've got to work your way up. You know, when you first start swinging the Leviathan Axe, all you have is throw and hit. You can't do any special abilities. And so when you go into this fight with Thor, it's a really cool way to be like, hey, I know that you're not letting it all out. I know that you're not. I know, show me the God of War is what Thor keeps saying, to Josh's point. But really, it's because the player can't unleash everything because you don't have any abilities at this point in the game. It's the very beginning of the game. I thought that was an incredible way to do that. And then also, just my note on what was really cool about it is that there's, I think, the 1 or 2 times that you actually, like the Leviathan Axe and Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, for those who don't know, clash. A huge frozen lightning bolt is stuck in the ground at that point, just showing like, hey, 2 gods have fought here. And that's just really cool.
While they walk in a circle around the weapons, met in the middle, talking to each other, while Kratos is like telling Thor, your son's died because of you. And Thor's like, I don't care about your fatherly advice. He's like, you're not father of the year either, which Kratos isn't.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. I love when they stop fighting and then they talk again and have that dialogue. The other thing that I think that really stands out in the Thor fight is that Thor kills Kratos. Do you guys remember this? Like, Thor hits Kratos, you get a death screen, and then all of a sudden you hear Thor's voice. This fight's not over till I say it's over. And he takes Mjolnir like a defibrillator, shocks your heart, brings you back into the fight, and then the fight continues. And the whole time Thor is like relishing, almost like he finally has someone who can maybe be on his level, where he's like, did my sons die to you from pure luck? Where's the real God of War? I can see why my sons died to you, but I know you're capable of more. And it's finally when Thor says, All-Father has a plan for Atreus. And that's when you hear Kratos lose all control. He lets loose with that battle shout that we've heard a million times with Spartan Rage.
And your boy, All-Father, has plans for him. There he is. There's the God of War.
And he punches Thor so hard. It's like a scene from a movie where it's like slow-mo and you see like Thor's, all of his face like jiggling as he gets hit on the side. And then Thor just says, all right, your blood debt's paid. And then he just flies away. It's like, it's the craziest opening fight to a game. The first hour of this game is absolutely incredible. And so what Michael was starting to mention earlier, which I think we can talk a little bit about more now, is that during this entire fight, Odin is alone with Atreus. And so Kratos is now like very quickly trying to get back to Atreus and has no idea what they've said. Have they made any promises or any deals or any treaties? And that kind of like sets up the primary tension between Kratos and Atreus for the rest of the game. In 2018, Kratos had all of his secrets. He never told Atreus that they are gods. He was trying to protect and keep Atreus safe and innocent because Kratos knows all gods turn evil because of their power. And here in Ragnarok, that really it's flipped on its head, where now Atreus has had these alone moments with Odin. Kratos isn't sure what to make of that. And Atreus starts calling himself Loki now. And so Kratos is like, well, did you make any promises? What did you tell Odin? Are you conspiring with Odin against me? And it's really interesting to see that tension between father and son. I was kind of curious to know what you guys thought about that.
I thought it really added to the story and not in a takeaway annoying way, because in 2018 there's parts when Atreus becomes very defiant, and honestly I get why they did it, but it was really annoying. It like the kid sucked. In this one he never goes full out he never goes all out on just being a tyrant. He believes he's doing the right thing, and he thinks his father is holding him back. And I think it's interesting where, you've got Atreus becoming a man and saying, well, Father, you don't know everything. Trust me. Please trust me. Please let me do this. I know something you don't know, but I can't tell you about it because, spoiler for later. And I actually thought it was really well done, and I appreciated that part of the story. And also, that was a chance to play as Atreus. You got to play as Atreus a whole bunch in this game. Well, he goes off and does his own thing.
I actually think that it does add a layer between Kratos and Atreus. And in the first game, it's just about, I need to teach this boy, I need to make him not weak, because he is weak in 2018. And you see that he is strong in Ragnarok. But at the same time, Kratos is still having an issue with trusting Atreus's abilities and the fact that he's not going to get himself killed right away and things like that. So you have the level of trust. I don't trust what's going on between Odin and Loki. You have can Kratos trust Atreus's skills at this point? Because early on in the game, Atreus goes off and you go looking for him and you're very worried about him. So you see these glimpses still of like the fatherly concern that Kratos has, and he can't let go, even though his son is a lot older and more capable now. But at the same time, he's getting older, and this is true with any parent, right? As your kids start getting more freedom, you start going like, how much can I actually trust you to have this freedom? And it plays into that perfectly. And on the flip side, you have the reveal from 2018 where, Atreus realizes he's Loki, and you see the giant mural where it shows Kratos laying in Atreus's lap, seemingly dead or dying. And so now you have Atreus not wanting to talk about or reveal that to Kratos at the same time. So I think there's a bunch of levels that happen with all of this that get set up very, very well, very early on in the game.
And that's precisely why this game feels so different than God of War 2 or God of War 3, where it's just big gods beating the crap out of each other for just revenge. And that's cool. It's fun. They're button mashers. But this is a very human story, even though you're talking about gods. The whole idea of raising a teenager into adulthood when they have their own passions and convictions, and those may or may not align with yours, and you have to just trust that you've done a good job and you have to let them go. That's something that every parent understands. And that makes the game feel grounded and not just a button masher between gods, which a lot of action games kind of devolve into. And that's what keeps this so fascinating.
And I think that's really what makes this rebooted, soft air quotes there, series of God of War really stand out. Because everyone's always liked the God of War games. They're great action games, but that's all they really were. And that's why these two games are elevated so much by critics and so forth, because it really does add so much feeling to the story. It's so much more. So when they came through and said, hey, let's make another God of War game, and made 2018, it's so impressive they chose to go in this direction, and that continues through Ragnarok.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's move on and talk about combat in Ragnarok. Now, it has been slightly revamped in Ragnarok. In my opinion, it feels largely the same. They did tweak it a little bit, and obviously the combos are going to be a little bit different. They're not going to just keep it exactly the same as 2018. But I think there is a little bit of a dose of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We've still got the axe, we still have the blades, and those are always going to be fun to play with. A lot of the combos are kept the same from the last game, but they do add some new ones. Josh, what was your overall take on the change in combat to Ragnarok?
I feel like the combat is mostly the same. Where it excels over 2018 is just choices. That's honestly the biggest thing that I could say in that. It is not vastly different by any means. And we actually kind of all had a conversation offline about Paul, you felt like it wasn't really different. I felt like it was faster. Michael was saying, hey, I feel like it's smoother. And we kind of just, talked back and forth a little bit. Ultimately, it's basically the same. Like you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But what they did is they tweaked it just enough to give you the sense of it is improved if you want it to be. That's the big thing. If you play, you can play Ragnarok 100% like you played God of War 2018 in the combat department and probably not care or notice a difference. But what you can do is you can take advantage of the different options that they give you in Ragnarok to make the combat feel more fleshed out. It's not necessary, but I think it is improved. I think if you get into it, ultimately you can play it as a button masher and just do nothing but swing the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe. Or you can get to where you are performing combos and launches and grabs and slams and things like that. It's not necessary, but it's flavor. And if you play that way, I think you get the advantage of saying, oh, I see the improvements that they made with Ragnarok.
Yeah, and it's what I had noticed about it too is it seems like they thought a little bit more about the combos, like what Josh was saying. You can go into a different move from one move. What I think was more smooth is it looks like the moves were designed to be together like a dance of some kind. Whereas in 2018, it's like, okay, I've done this. Like, for instance, if you do the combo that's like right bumper, right bumper, right bumper, right trigger, he goes into an epic move. If you do the same thing in Ragnarok, it feels like this is a real thing that you would do, like the way he swings around and the way his momentum carries him into the next move is just what I had noticed a little bit, which really, I think, sets it above a little bit.
Yeah, and they also just make the combat, I would say, a little more interesting. So, for example, I was reading an interview where they basically had said, in the 2018 entry, the triangle button only had one function, and it was to recall the Leviathan Axe, and that's it. And so they're like, you know what? That's a whole button that we can do more with. And so in Ragnarok, if you press and hold triangle for about half a second, it will imbue the Leviathan Axe with frost magic or the Blades of Chaos with fire magic, and now it's going to do more damage on your next hit. And you can even put points into where now when you recall the axe, if you just keep holding triangle, it's immediately imbued when you call it back. So it just starts to add a little more complicated combat. I think that's very neat. They did also tinker with the shields a bit. I don't know how much you guys played around with the shields, but they do give you multiple options where you can now craft and upgrade shields. You can focus more on parry or more on blocking. I don't know about you guys. I just prefer straight up blocking, and that's pretty much all I used in this game.
I'm terrible at parrying. Terrible. So I use the Stonewall shield from beginning to end, which basically says, hey, there's not a lot of range to this guy, but it's going to stop him from hitting you a little bit better than like a specialized shield that's not going to stop as much, but it's really good at parrying. I did like the options, though.
I think the shield part was really cool. And again, I think the key word here is just going to be options. You know, you have more options at your fingertips to fight how you want to fight, whereas you didn't necessarily have that in the 2018 one. I went with the parry shield because I love the combat in God of War. The 2018's combat, Ragnarok's combat, I played on the next to highest difficulty level. I got my butt kicked, man. But at the same time, it's one of the things that I absolutely love about the game. And so I went with the shield that where it's all about parrying, because if you time it right, there's a huge payoff there. But if you whiff, ouch, it hurts at the same time, you know?
Right.
But I love the fact that they give you these options and they say, hey, you want to just hold your shield up like you do in Dark Souls? Fine. There's a payoff for that. Want to try to time your parries? There's a payoff for that. And then what's really cool, without getting into too many spoilers, is there's multiple shield options that you wind up having that play very differently.
Yeah.
You know, and I just thought, like, what a cool way to go, hey, we've got the offense part of it down. We're giving you all these choices on how you want to approach combat there. But at the same time, we're giving you all these defense options too, which I thought was a really neat aspect.
Yeah, you want to know what my problem was with the combat in God of War? My problem with the combat in God of War is that we'd come off of Gotham Knights and went right into this, and I was playing Kratos like Batgirl the whole time. Like, there's almost no block in Gotham Knights. You're just dodging the whole entire time and throwing stuff, and I just kind of rolled back into that. Like, the first 2 hours of the game, I had a hard time because in Gotham Knights, it was the circle button that dodges, and the X on the bottom dodges in God of War. How many times I pushed the wrong one and died during that Thor fight? And I'm like, oh, I just want to dodge with that button.
Nice. Yeah, and then the shields add that extra complication with the mechanic where if you have like your Stonewall shield, you can only block so many times because your shield absorbs all the energy. And then you have to double tap L1 and you'll smash the ground and unleash it. And now you're doing offensive ability with your shield. And so there are things like that built into the shields that it's not just straight up blocking. It actually turns a good defense into a good offense. And so enemies, there are times when you have to parry or block, or this might be an unblockable move that you have to dodge, or they might have a shield and you have to do a shield slam to get rid of their shield. So there's all kinds of stuff like that. And even speaking more to the customizable stuff that you're talking about, Josh, the Spartan Rage system has also been revamped.
I love what they did with that, dude.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Maybe in generalities. Maybe we don't want to spoil specifics, but like they give you more customizable options.
You get, we'll talk more in depth during the spoiler section, because part of what makes God of War amazing is the discovery, right? Like there's some major spoilers that we'll get into later on, but we're going to keep it safe for people that are listening right now. But they give you other options for Spartan Rage in this game that I thought was an absolutely great thing for them to do, because again, it just gives you choice in how you want to play. You know, and I think there's 3 different options, if I remember right.
Yeah,
and I cycled between all of them, and it was really neat. And the testament to how well they designed these is that there was not one that I found to be a favorite. I felt like the 3 options for Spartan Rage all had a time and a place in the game to be super valuable and like effective. And so I found myself actually rotating through those more often than I thought that I would in that case. The other thing I want to say on combat real quick that I did notice that's different between the 2018 one is the runic attacks. Mm-hmm. So runic attacks in 2018 were super OP. Honestly, like that's how I beat all the Valkyries in 2018. Like the runic attacks, you got them fast and furious. You were getting lots and lots of them. You could level them up really quick, and they were very, very strong. In Ragnarok, they don't give you very many options for like the first, I feel like almost 2/3 of the game. So I don't know if the developer said, hey, it's hard to balance around these, so we're going to limit them. But I actually really liked that aspect because it made you get good at the mechanics of combat before you got into the really strong, magical, powerful attacks of combat.
Yeah, where it's like, let me just call in these 3 wolves and they're going to kill everything for me.
Right.
They force you to learn how the combat works. Yeah, if I wanted to be a little nitpicky, I will say one of the Spartan Rage options is a little less exciting than the other 2. It's very handy, and you have to use it on certain fights, but it's not as fun as 2018 where you just start grabbing boulders out of the ground and chucking them at enemies. One of the options is a little more boring in that regard. Now, as far as combat goes, is there anything in particular that you guys liked or didn't like? I will say for me, the one thing that I thought was maybe just a little bit out of balance was the boss fights versus the swarms of enemies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the bosses, because I played it on normal, all right? And primarily the reason for that is because Josh and I had to share the PS5. Yeah. We had limited time.
Right.
I said, you know what? I'm not going to blaze through it as fast as possible on easy. I'm just going to play on normal. I won't bump up the difficulty. I thought some of the bosses were probably a touch too easy. I think I died at most to bosses maybe 3 or 4 times at the very most. A few of them, actually most of them, I one-shot. But the swarms of enemies are very hard to keep track. I died so much more to swarms than I did bosses, and I felt like maybe that was just like, I know I'm getting nitpicky, but that was a little out of balance.
Yeah, I feel like you're 100% right. I didn't die to bosses a lot because also their mechanics were relatively easy to learn early on. I think all of the hardest fights in this game are the fights you don't actually have to do. It's the side stuff. And I think it kind of fringes on spoiler territory, so I'll cover it later.
But it mirrors 2018.
Okay, so 2018, you have the Valkyries that you fight, and you don't have to go fight them. I think you kind of are meant to fight the first one to open up a side quest because you just kind of find it, and you're like, oh, hey, defeat this Valkyrie. And then she's like, her soul goes, and it says, well, find my other Valkyrie sisters. In this one, I don't even recall what the whole story was with the Berserkers, to be honest with you, but you have the Berserkers, which are the same thing. There's 12 of them that they actually go across 9 different fights because a couple of them have 2 or 3 Berserkers at the same time. Those were far harder by night and day than any boss. Even when you fight the last boss in Ragnarok later on in the game, obviously there's a last boss fight. That fight was also not nearly as hard as the higher level Berserkers. I had to actually go through and find out. Like, I had to Google, hey, let's go easiest to hardest on these fights because, I went in and got trucked. I actually put it down just to see. I put it down to story only mode on the hardest one and still got completely obliterated. Like, two hits and you're dead. I was like, what's this fight like in story only mode? So it's really interesting that you're right, except for the swarms are much harder. I died a lot more because people were hitting me in the back a lot more. Yeah,
I'll say I'm with you, Paul, on this one. I played this game on, like I said, the next to hardest difficulty. I died a lot. And the swarms of monsters, and by swarms, we're talking like anytime you're facing 4 or more enemies, I would die so many times to some of those fights versus the boss fights in the game that it started to border on frustrating just a little bit because it was more so the camera angle and the inability to get a second to be able to like focus on somebody. You've got guys trying to melee you, you're having to dodge. You've got guys range attacking you, you're having to dodge those. And it's just it's almost too hard. And so that I'm with you on that complaint that fighting 5 guys is way harder than fighting like a boss fight in this game.
Yeah,
you know?
I know exactly what you're talking about too. Specifically, like the worst, most frustrating part was the Dark Elves because they have a combo where if you don't parry properly, you will get hit 4 times in a row and it will take away 2/3 of your health. And if 2 of them are doing it at the same time, there's nothing you can do. You're dead.
Yeah, and that stuff's very rare for a game that really nails combat. I didn't experience that often, but when it does hit you, it's just like, oh, come on. Like, how did that just happen? It's like we get chain stunned over and over. So there's a couple points like that, but you definitely learn over the course of doing that same fight over and over. Okay, if I position myself here, my back is to this cliff and I can see everyone else a little bit better. Okay, I need to focus on that guy riding that beast because then I can get on top of that beast and fight the other people. And so you start to kind of figure that stuff out. Most of the time I found it to work really well, and only on occasion did it bother me. But then again, I also played on normal difficulty. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the voice acting work, because I think overall this might be the best voice acted game ever.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something bad, Paul. I was like, dude, wait, like what planets are we on here?
I could never speak a bad word about the voice acting.
Okay,
it's incredible.
The way you said that, I was like, is Paul about to say something? But dude, part of Ragnarok, comparing it again to 2018, is your cast of characters is 5 times as large in Ragnarok as it was like in 2018's version. And part of that is they introduce all these new characters, all of these people that either you've never met before or you're meeting, you're understanding more and more about them and stuff like that. There was a point in Ragnarok, I want to say it was probably about the halfway point, where I just stopped and listened to a conversation that was happening. It was in Sindri's house when you're having dinner. And I got so wrapped up in what everybody was talking about that I forgot to play the game. Like, no lie, this is
talking
how
about
good,
tears, Stu.
This is how, honestly, right? Like, I got so just wrapped up in listening to these side conversations that people were having that I thought it was part of the game. And then I sat there like an idiot for like 30 minutes before I finally went like, wait, am I supposed to do something? And I hit the controller and I realized that it was like, this is just side content. Like, this wasn't part of the main story. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I got so enthralled in this freaking dinner conversation that had nothing to do with the main story of the game. But that is a testament to how good these actors are. I'm with you, man. I can't think of a game where a cast of characters and voice actors have drawn me into a world so much as these people have.
Josh, it's so funny you said that, because there was so many times when I was done upgrading my armor, my axe and stuff, but Sindri and Brock were still having a conversation. I'm like, I can walk away or I can sit here and listen to this and see what they're saying. And the game gives you the option to do that. Stay there and listen to it. Like, if you haven't played this game yet, stick around and listen to the conversations, because they're rewarding. But I'll just cover 2 things real fast that I was really interested in seeing when I saw the casting list for this game before I played it. Was one, Richard Schiff as Odin. I was not sure how that was going to work. I'm like, you think of Odin and you think of like Anthony Hopkins from the Marvel movies. You think of, again, more of a Zeus type of god. He is the king of all the gods in Norse mythology, unless I'm missing some smaller thing that I don't know about. But Richard Schiff he's not an imposing actor, but when you watch him walking around as Odin, the character actually looks exactly like the actor too, and somehow it really worked. And I think the way it worked is because you could really see how I know I've covered this before, but the motion capture, these characters looked and acted and felt exactly like the voices were coming out. And then again with Ryan Hurst as Thor, who told in an interview that he modeled his character more off of, if you were looking at the Marvel movies, more off of the Hulk than Chris Hemsworth's, not Hemsworth. There's no Helm.
Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth's Thor. That worked so well too. And it really, really came out early in when you guys were talking about that conversation that Thor is having with Kratos in the very beginning of the game during that fight. You're like, nailed it. This voice acting for Thor is perfect. It's exactly what it needs to be. Dude. Oh, and also Doc McStuffins is in it as Angrboda.
Nice. Now, Christopher Judge and Sonny Suljic get most of the acclaim for voicing Kratos and Atreus. They're both nominated for Best Performance at the Game Awards. They're both fantastic. They were both great in the last game. I thought Richard Schiff as Odin stole every single scene he was in.
I agree.
I think he is the best villain I've seen in a game in ages, because he doesn't have to fight anyone. He doesn't have to pull out a gun or a knife or a magical staff or anything. It's just his voice and his command, and he's in complete control, seemingly, of everything. He just manipulates and plays people, and I found myself so enthralled with every single scene of his that anytime he was gone, I could not wait to spend more time with Odin.
What do you want?
How about peace? How does peace strike the esteemed, retired god of war? How about we just don't kill each other? How about you stay home, kick up your feet, seek no quarrel with me, and I'll have none with you. Of course, it means that one has to stop his search for Tyr.
Yeah. We know what you've been up to. Stop it.
Tyr's old ways are dead. He is dead. You understand? And then that's it. Then we're square.
You almost trusted him.
Almost exactly what I was going to say.
You.
Dude, this was how good Richard Schiff was as Odin, is that there were many times in the game where I went, maybe Odin's actually not bad. Maybe
Freya got him wrong.
He's misunderstood. Is that part of this game? Is that like what they're going for? Because I'm kind of digging Odin, man.
Yeah, even though the entire time in both games, Mimir and Freya are like, do not trust him. He will manipulate you. He's bad. And still,
he manipulated me because I was liking the guy.
I was like, I don't know. And I think that's such a testament. Again, I know we don't have a lot of time to spend on this, but such a testament to, Richard Schiff he's not a big actor. He's in a million things. You've seen him, look him up. You've seen him in everything
Emmy
you've
for
ever.
The West Wing. He's a famous actor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But he's always been a side character actor. He's never in a lot of ways been stealing the show. Side guy in Lost World, Jurassic Park. Yep. In this, it's amazing that you see some of his best work in his career in a video game where he's motion captured. It's because I was like, maybe he's right. And then of course you snap out of it pretty fast.
Yeah, and also you already mentioned Ryan Hurst as Thor. I want to back that up as well, Michael. I thought he was incredible. I did not realize it was the guy that plays Gary Bertier, the quarterback in Remember the Titans gets paralyzed. I was like, oh man, that he did such a good job as Thor. It's a very interesting take, and I won't spoil exactly who Thor is and how he acts, but I thought the voice acting work was phenomenal for how they wrote Thor in this game.
He faked the drunk Thor really well.
Yeah.
You legitimately care about almost every single character that they introduce in Ragnarok. And that, like I said, that is hands down credit to the actors, credit to the script, credit to the story, because this story is pretty crazy. There are times where the story is hard to follow a little bit.
Yes.
But the characters and the acting, I think, are some of the best that I have ever seen in a video game.
Yeah, there's so many layers to every single one of your pivotal characters in the story that you really do get caught up in it.
Yeah, and the music in this game is incredibly epic.
Yeah, Bear McCreary, kudos, man. I know Hats he's off. Super hot right now. He did Walking Dead and a bunch of stuff, but dude, the soundtrack, the way that it heightens the scenes, the way that it plays on your emotions. You need a soundtrack to hit at the right time to really enhance everything. And man, does the soundtrack do that. I was really impressed many, many times with what was happening in the background with the music and the effects and stuff like that.
It's genius level work in how he will take Kratos' theme and then weave it into Atreus' theme where they play simultaneously. So in these scenes where you see characters together, he will merge their themes. The OST for this is incredible. Go play it on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. I would like to think he's a shoo-in for Best Music and Soundtrack at the Game Awards. I would not be shocked at all for him to win this. The music really is great. I don't know that I really have anything else to add on top of it, but I know we all loved it.
I'll just add a tribute again to Bear McCreary. The first time I ever heard him was Battlestar Galactica 2004, and just to challenge himself, he later on said, he changed the theme of the music or the instruments and the style between every single season. The first season, he only uses drums for the most part. By season 3, he's using Celtic music, and somehow the Celtic music, with even including bagpipes and instruments I've never heard of, works. The next season, it's all people chanting, and you're like, what? How did, like, it's just really, the guy is a genius.
Yeah, he really did fantastic composing work here.
In both games.
Yeah. Okay, we will take a short break and we will be right back with more Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. Okay, guys, now it's time for us to go ahead and share spoilers. We're going to hop into whatever else we want to talk about in this game. If you want to keep yourself spoiler free and you don't want to know, but you want to jump ahead to the final segments of the show, go ahead and jump forward 26 minutes and 35 seconds. All right, guys, what do you want to talk about? What should we cover here first?
So this is where we talk about the story, everybody, because there's a huge story in this game, but we can't talk about that and ruin it for people either. So also, I'm going to give one more preface. If you are planning on playing God of War Ragnarok, do yourself a favor and skip this part. You can always come back to it later, but do not spoil it, because part of what makes these games amazing is the discovery. So final warning from all of us, if you are going to play this game, skip this part, because it will be worth it. That being said, man, this story in this game is big, sometimes confusing, a little convoluted.
Yes.
Super epic. Sometimes like, why did you put that in there if you didn't go down that road? It's like this. They tried to do everything bigger and better than 2018. And to a large degree, they succeeded in that. To some degree, going so big is at the same time going to make it to where it's not as intimate.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best summarization of like the story part that I could say.
You're 100% right, Josh. And I'll highlight a couple ways where they do that in a few minutes. But let's start by talking about Tyr. All right.
That's where we go.
In this game, you have convinced yourself that Atreus has convinced himself that he's tracked down Tyr. He's not dead. Odin has kept him imprisoned. Kratos trusts Atreus. You go, you find Tyr, you bust him out from his jail. And Tyr says, "I'm no longer a fighter." And Kratos even says, "You're the Norse god of war," which is funny because Kratos doesn't want to fight either. Like, you would think they would bond over two gods of war saying, "We want to set aside our weapons." And so Tyr comes across as a little bit of a wuss. I don't know about you guys. I fully expected at some point later in the game, he's going to be forced to fight. And he's going to be incredible.
That's what I kept waiting for.
I kept waiting for Goosebumps because he knew it was coming.
Yes, I was waiting for that, or to find out that he is secretly working for Odin. I knew it had to be one or the other. It wasn't going to be just as simple as, oh, we found Tyr, but he's not going to play any role in the story. Like, that's not going to be the case. So then later when you find out that Tyr is actually Odin himself, like, that was a really cool reveal.
I'll be honest, I had no idea. That one got me to, like, I was like, and I love how it kind of came about too, because one of the characters, Brock, starts to catch on and he says, "Hey man, I've noticed like the way that you refer to Atreus, the way that you talk, like Brock's," and I'll be honest, I had no idea up until that point. And then it was like the light bulb went off and my brain went, "Oh!" And then just the craziest sequence of events happens. And I was like, oh my goodness, they got me. They got me again, man.
Well, and it's crazy too, because like what you know from the first game is that Tyr is the one who unlocks the ways to the realms. It's not like in the Marvel movies where it's Heimdall who does it. In this universe, Tyr is the one who can make the realms, and he even in the first game hides ways to like Jotunheim and stuff. And so in this one, it's kind of funny because that moment you're talking about, he's like, "Oh, I have another way to Asgard." And Brock is like, "How come you didn't bring this up earlier that you have another way into Asgard? Why wouldn't we have just done that? Like, I don't know, 7 hours of gameplay ago." And then that reveal that he was Odin the whole time was incredible. And also very sad because I kind of liked where Tyr was going, even though again, it was really just Odin pulling the wool over my eyes because, after a fight, he does nothing. He's like, "Listen, I was fighting with my shield when I should have been fighting with my sword. I'm going to help you guys out now." And you're like, awesome. We're going for that reveal. We're going for it. And it never happens. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about this anymore, but you do see Tyr after the game. You find the real Tyr after the game. So I can go into that. I'll go into that very briefly. But this is, again, it could be a tie-in to the spoilers. It's a side quest. So basically, parts of Asgard have fallen. And you have to go close these, like, basically rifts of Asgard. Not really rifts, because you can't go back and forth. They're remnants of Asgard. Asgard is shattered after the game goes everywhere. Well, when you go and do this, one of them, you free Tyr, the real Tyr. And again, we talk about, like, why was Tyr left alive if he's literally the most powerful god? Why wouldn't Odin kill him? Well, because he needed him for his form. That was kind of foreshadowing, I guess, although I didn't catch on. It was completely surprising to me. But you do find him later, and he's walking around, and he's just kind of making these side comments about it. You don't really get a whole lot from it, but you can't help but wonder if maybe it's part of that mural in 2018 where you do see the symbols of, like, Egypt and, like, of the Mayan Empire. Like, how far can this series go now that we've destroyed Ragnarok? What if we look into Egyptian mythology, and can Tyr go there too? Because it's shown him opening the realms in that temple to other mythologies. And so I think that was maybe a reason why they still have Tyr alive in the game. I don't know.
I hope we get to see more from Tyr in the next entry. It looks like Kratos' days of fighting are over. I would have loved to see Kratos and Tyr team up together, and maybe we will get that. I don't know. But one of the funniest things about the reveal that Odin was Tyr is, I don't know if you guys remember this or if you've revisited any scenes. I watched a lot on YouTube after. But do you remember when they visit the one giant shrine with Tyr, and they realize that Groa had lied about the prophecies, and they say, oh, we can win Ragnarok, Odin can die, and Asgard gets destroyed, and Mimir is even laughing, saying, Odin's been working with a false prophecy, finally we know something Odin doesn't know.
Oh.
And Tyr is standing there staring, studying the mural, realizing now in hindsight, that was Odin. He absolutely knows the whole time. Man. It's just one of those, like, very rewarding moments on second rewatch where it's like, oh, that's so clever. He's there the whole time.
I didn't even think of that.
I didn't either until I went back and then saw it again. Also tied to the Odin reveal being Tyr, he kind of takes out our boy Brock in the process.
Oh, I was so sad, dude.
Poor
this
Brock.
Game,
that's terrible.
I'm with Mike. This game, there were a few moments in this game where I got a little choked up. Like, there were some moments between Kratos and Atreus, or, you know, some of the other characters, or Brock dying, where I was just like, no. Like, no, I don't want this, man. You know, or some of the emotional, I mean, some of it's intentional. They definitely intentionally try to tug on your heartstrings, and I'm okay with that because it worked.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, I'm a sucker for that stuff, so, like, fine. But yeah, that part kind of sucked.
So I'm going to hark back to Bear McCreary and the music again real fast. At the end of the game, the first side quest that you're, like, thrown at is attending Brock's funeral.
Yeah.
The music at his funeral is it blows away whatever else you hear in this game. Like, I was crying for like an hour later just wandering on my house because I attended Brock's funeral, and it is hard. I hated it.
Well,
it's incredible.
It's especially sad because I don't even know that they really needed to go this far to do our boy Brock wrong. They tell you he's not even eligible for an afterlife because part of his soul was left behind. It's like, really? We got to rob Brock of an afterlife also? So our boy Sindri is reduced to this like really bitter, empty shell that he was before. And so it's like seeing Sindri reduced to like ashes is also really sad because he's partially responsible for why Brock no longer has an afterlife. So it's a really tragic tale at the end of those two brothers.
Did you notice that when he shows up at Asgard at the end of the game, like his eyes are red?
Dude, he looks crazy.
He is in. That was something I thought was really nice that they did that because they didn't have to do that, but like the attention to detail again in the direction of the game. His eyes are red, like he's been crying for days. It's horrible.
Yeah, and he's like, he almost doesn't even care that he's taking out innocents as he like destroys all of the Odin reinforcements around the wall. Like he's got his little instrument, he hits it, he's like, there you go, you got what you wanted. And he's just like, it's not that he's acting soulless, but it's like you lose everything that made Sindri Sindri. He's like a different character at that point, and it really just makes you hope that he turns out okay. He needs some time to grieve.
Yeah. We have to talk about the Dropner spear in spoiler territory. I'm trying to think of like, what are some of the biggest moments of like that stand out in my mind. And the Dropner spear is one of those. It was also one of the most confusing initially because they're like, well, we need this weapon. And they're like, well, Dropner. And then I'm like, what the heck is Dropner? And it's a ring. And then I'm like, wait, what's going on? And then you have to go see this mermaid lady. And so there was a little bit where I was really lost. And I'm like, I actually stopped and looked up what Dropner was because I'm like, what is like, I have a Dropner spear. How is this thing powerful? But that whole sequence I thought was incredible, man. You make this weapon to kill Heimdall because Heimdall can foresee everybody's actions. So you can't fight him because he knows what you're going to do. So you have to go make a weapon that can kill Heimdall, which plays a huge part in the story of the game. And Kratos kind of going back to old form because it's like, well, I'm making a weapon that's going to kill a god. This is my mission. So I thought like, okay, this is really neat. But that whole sequence, dude, they know how to like get you amped because you get this spear. It's a freaking Spartan spear, number one. So I'm like, oh yeah, like the new weapon. And then the next 30 minutes is you testing this weapon out and seeing what it's capable of. And I'm just thinking like, I love you developers for this, man, because what a sequence. Like this whole thing took like an hour or so and I loved every second of it.
And the way they added a third weapon to the game that, again, was nothing like the other two. It added so many more layers to the combat in the game that I loved. I found myself, once I had the spear, like every single fight, it became like second motion. Like, do I use the Blades of Chaos? Do I use the Leviathan Axe? Do I use the Dropner Spear? And it would just be like, oh, this is happening. Spear real quick. Toot, 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 toot. Also, that Heimdall fight. When you finally do fight Heimdall with that spear, at first, I'm like, this doesn't work. He's still avoiding everything. And then you have that realization of how you have to beat him, that every time he deflects the spear, it goes in the ground and you've got to track him over it and blow it up to damage him until you break, and that part when he first gets hit and he's shocked and you're like, you are so dead now.
So this is what I was going to ask. How does the Dropner spear, how does Heimdall still not understand your intentions? I still don't totally get why you're able to use that to kill him, because he knows that they can blow up, so why would he still run over them? I didn't totally get that.
So it goes back to, I think, when they were taking the rings out of the mine or whatever, where Sindri or Brock goes down with a bucket and grabs the chain.
Yeah, they get the ring.
Where somehow this somehow this spear exists to me like both in and outside of realms in normal time, and Heimdall just can't see it. Once it's been thrown, it's he only sees the one that Kratos is holding, but the spear like duplicates itself. And that was kind of what I inferred.
Dropner replicates itself is what it was. So the actual mythology of Dropner is it is a ring that replicates itself, and it's made out of gold. So this is how Odin winds up basically having all the money he ever needs to rule, the 9 realms kind of thing. And so they even mentioned that, hey, they stole Dropner from Odin. The dwarves did it. The brothers did it. So when they turn this into this spear, basically the spear can replicate itself just like the ring could. And so because it's replicating itself, that's why you can throw so many copies of it and embed them and things like that. And it just overloads Heimdall's ability to know where everything is going and your intentions, because this spear is replicating itself so he can't track everything. That's the best, I got out of it,
It's a little convoluted. You just got to take it at face value.
Yeah, it's kind of, you and I kind of came to the same conclusion. It was kind of like, well, it's because he can't see the...
Did you guys like the spear? Did you use it a lot?
I loved the spear.
I didn't like it.
I used it a lot.
I didn't like it.
I got real nasty with that spear.
Did you?
I put a lot of points into it. Now, I did almost 100% the game, and a lot of the stuff that got good with the spear was way later.
Yeah.
Again, you don't get the spear until at least 2/3 in the game. Halfway. About halfway in the game, you get the spear.
I'd say a little over. Yeah.
Okay. A little over. So we'll say 3/5. But, it's almost like I used it a whole bunch later on with some of the Berserker fights, I think was where it became really handy. But that was after I had it maxed, every point into it.
See, I put every point into it too, because by the end of this game, you can basically buy every skill. And I will say it's very funny to turn enemies into pincushions where you are just throwing spear, and then you make them all detonate. Like, it is very funny. I love the idea of the spear, and I liked the Heimdall fight, but I did not find myself using it very often later. I only would pull it out if I felt like I had to. Like if the Leviathan Axe or the Blades of Chaos weren't working.
Yeah. I really wanted to like it, but I felt like it was inferior to the Blades of Chaos and the Leviathan Axe.
One of the things I liked about it was some of the abilities that you use on it. Some of the runic abilities are very good for crowd control because it would either pull in or push away groups of enemies, and that's kind of why I favored it later on. More, in that part, like normally you use the Blades of Chaos for a lot of that stuff. Leviathan Axe feels like more single target. Blades of Chaos like more multi-target. The spear was more crowd control. Like, okay, I'm getting overwhelmed. So some of the Crucible challenges, you've got to use the spear and try to get these guys corralled in front of you or just get them away from you.
Yeah. Since we're going into spoilers, I do want to share a couple things that I found lacking in Ragnarok's story. The combat, I have nothing negative to say. I think the combat in this is a little bit better than 2018. I do feel like the story elements do suffer a bit. I think they bit off more than they can chew. I don't know why this wasn't split into 2 games. You've got enough villains, you have enough story. I felt like in large sections, they kind of just yada the details. They're like, you know what? We see in prophecies that we're fighting with Hell's armies and we're fighting with the Dark Elves. And then toward the end of the game, they're just like, okay, Freyr, and like Freyr says, I'll just go reunite the elves after centuries of fighting. And they're like, well, how are you going to do it? And he goes, well, they really like me. And I'm like, really? Like, we don't get to see it. We don't get any kind of explanation. And clearly they just didn't have enough time to delve into all those things. Hell's army gets recruited. We don't see or experience any of that. Freyr kind of pops up out of nowhere. We don't really spend any time with him. And then he dies saving us. And I'm like, I wish I cared, but like I don't know anything about Freyr. I didn't spend enough time with him. So I felt like the game almost felt like it was on fast forward unnecessarily. I wished it just had a little bit of a slower pace and they could have fleshed out some of that stuff a little bit more.
I feel like what they really could have done too is if they split it in 2 games, because I had the thought about that until you just mentioned it, but like Freya's story, which I have to cover in spoiler territory. We don't have to do it now because we're on a different part, but I have to cover that because it was one of my favorite parts of this game, was just the conclusion to the Freya story. But I think you could have made that almost a whole game with her and Freyr and all that stuff and uniting the elves and all that. That might have actually worked because, again, uniting the elves, that's not a small thing. And then, of course, the outcome of what happens with Freya to break the curse, very emotional part.
Well, even going into the Freya stuff, she has spent 3 years trying to murder Kratos.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, like, Atreus turns into a bear and Kratos just says, no, don't harm her. She's our friend. And then Freya's like, you know what? I probably can't forgive you, but let's just go ahead and have an alliance. And I was like, really? 3 whole years of devoting her life to killing Kratos. And it's just snap of a finger. And now we have this alliance where she's going out on missions with us. Again, I felt like that's a little fast. I feel like and I know that you first send Atreus and Atreus goes out and talks to her first. But again, I felt like it just turned things around a little too quickly for me.
Yeah, there's a lot. Like I said, I mentioned this earlier, but the story is so grand in a lot of ways. They try to go so big that some of that falls apart a little bit. I had exception with a few things. Number one, there's the whole series with Angrboda, where you're learning about the giants. This is the slowest part of the game.
Oh, I did too.
I like the character of Angrboda. I thought she was great, but this part of the game is very slow.
90 minutes.
It's all about learning about the giants.
For 90 minutes?
Right. I mean, I get that it's whole like, oh, I'm finally going to learn some about the giants, but then it's like all their conversation and everything, I felt like could have been condensed into like 10 minutes. Like, give me just the facts that I need to know. And then, so that gets really convoluted after a while, and they go down this whole thing, and I left this 90-minute segment going, I don't really know anymore, other than, like, their souls are in marbles? Like, okay. Like, and I get that plays a part later on, but that part, I was just kind of like, well, what was that all about? And then you get into the whole fate versus prophecy versus your choice thing, and I think that's a neat premise, but they didn't have time to really explain a lot of that. And so
I wanted to bring up that same thing, Josh. I wrote it down. This did nothing for me in this game because never for a second do you think in the universe of God of War that you have no choice.
Right.
You don't believe that ever.
Right.
So why is that like a main tension of the story? You don't believe in prophecy in this game. Nobody does. So why does it even matter? Why is it even in the story? They even say, like, when you visit, what are they called? The Noons or
the Norns.
The Norns, thank you.
Yeah.
They even say, yeah, basically you're just so predictable, we can guess the future, but it's not really set in stone, but it is because we know your nature. But then if it's not set in stone, then why do prophecies even matter? It's just... It made no sense to me,
like
really.
the aspect. I like that, hey, is your fate, is it predetermined? Do your choices matter? And I like that they brought this up in the game because they're trying to figure out how they're going to defeat Odin. And they've got all these prophecies that Atreus super believes in because the giants left him behind. Like, I get the conflict. I get what they were going for. I just felt like it really kind of fell short in that regard because is Kratos going to kill Heimdall or is he going to spare Heimdall? And then they're struggling with the fate versus prophecy thing. And it's like, well, he tries to spare Heimdall, but then Heimdall winds up being a jerk and Kratos kills him anyway. Yeah, and I get what they're going for, but it never really pays off, I guess. Like that whole interaction with fate and prophecy never just had a payoff to me.
They could have taken a lot of that part and spent more time with Freya, who we really care about.
I don't care about Freya that much. Now I want to hear Michael's because he said Freya. He had to bring it up. But Freya in 2018 God of War, I thought was phenomenal. And I'll be honest, I did not care for her that much in Ragnarok.
I liked her. I think it was rushed a little bit. I think I really liked having her around for a lot of the post-game stuff because after the game, you run around with Freya and not Atreus. Sorry about that. Spoilers. Oh, we're in spoiler territory. Yeah. We can do it. I really got connected to specifically the writing when it frees her curse because what we know about Freya is she has a curse where she cannot harm anything. At all. She cannot harm anything. That's what she is until they lift Odin's curse. And Kratos, that's why she's teaming along. And I kind of bought into this. I wish they would have gone into it more, but I bought into it that her and Kratos have a common goal. And one of the reasons that she is with Kratos this whole time is because he's basically like, listen, if you want to go free your curse, I'll come with you. And she's like, well, because you owe me? And he's like, no, because it's what I would do. And you're like, okay, I kind of get that. So that's why they kind of hang out in the middle of the game a little bit. When they lift the curse, though, the line that she kind of says, and I'm going to paraphrase this because she looks at him and she says, now that the curse is broken, I have to either forgive you or I have to kill you. And you see her reach for her sword and you think she's going to fight him, maybe. And then she kind of puts it down and says, I can't do either. And I'm like, that line was really heavy. She can't forgive him because he still killed her son, but she can't kill him because he's an ally and they both have a common goal. And then later you kind of get more from the stories that make it so that you kind of believe the alliance and the friendship can exist. But it wasn't enough. I think I was making things up in my head to love it as much as I do, but I liked what they did with it. I just wish they spent more time on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the emotional payoff between Kratos and Atreus, because I thought that was handled really well. This is where you have the benefit of 2 entire games of Kratos not really knowing how to connect emotionally to his son. It was one of my major complaints when Josh drafted Kratos as best gaming father after 2018, and I said no.
Still stand by it.
This man is not in any shape to be father of the year. Also, I don't know if you guys saw the dialogue, but there's a really funny sequence with him and Mimir when he's asking, did I prepare Atreus enough? And Mimir's like, oh yeah, the boy can survive and handle himself. And he's like, no, I mean like in the ways of love. And Mimir's like, me and the boy have had some conversations. So I'm like, yeah, Kratos can't even touch those subjects with Atreus. But the fact that at the end of the game, they have learned to fully trust one another. Kratos gives the little comment about Loki is gone, but Atreus is here. And you even see Kratos shed a little tear.
Dude, I shed a little tear. I'm not going to lie, dude. The facial expression, they'd zoom in on Kratos, and I was like, is he about to cry? Because if he's going to cry, I'm going to cry.
You get the big hug. They hug each other. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Speaking of emotional payoff, one of the reasons why you have to play God of War 2018, of course, if you're listening this far, I guess it doesn't matter because you probably have. But one of the reasons you have to play it is that one of the first things that Kratos says to Atreus in God of War 2018 is when he kills the deer, and he says something about how you have to not feel. You have to just not feel
Close
it.
Close yourself.
Close your heart.
Close yourself. Close your heart. And then when the end of this game, when they're in Asgard and there's innocent people there, when you guys probably know what he said better than I do, but when Kratos tells him basically open your heart. It actually shows so much more about Kratos' character arc than it does Atreus's. It's so incredible because he basically says, no, you should feel. We should be compassionate.
Yeah. Kratos can accept his son for who his son is instead of trying to make Atreus act like Kratos.
Right.
Kratos says that's what makes you unique and makes you you. So you open your heart to it because you're not me. You're your own separate adult now. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, I like the. I mean, you obviously you see the evolution of Atreus in Ragnarok. I think that's one of the highlights. But at the same time, you see the growth and evolution of Kratos as well. And a lot of what I love about the story and the payoff in this game is seeing them both mature and come to grips with things that maybe they're not so good at and ways to be like a better family as well. So.
Yeah. Just one little side comment about the character development more of Atreus. At one point, I don't remember when this happens in the game, it's towards the end. Atreus coughs and Kratos is like, boy, is it? He doesn't say boy because he never says boy in this game. He literally doesn't say it one time. But he's like, Atreus, is it back? Talking about that cough that he had in the first game. And Atreus is like, no, Dad, I just swallowed my spit.
Yeah. There's some very funny moments. I feel like this game had a lot more humor. In 2018, which I
loved
appreciated.
That though, dude. There's one part I can't remember. Are you with Tyr? You're with somebody, and you're playing as Kratos, and you go off and you smash a chest that you see.
Yes,
and the Atreus just goes, "Yeah, my dad likes smashing things," or he really likes going to look for gold or something. I can't remember what he said.
Tyr says, "Why are you going that way? The objective's here," and Atreus goes, oh, yeah, he does that. You'd be surprised how much treasure he finds. Like, they even poke fun at even that mechanic in God of War.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, though, since you talked about Mimir, when I played God of War Ragnarok, and then I went to the first, third of God of War 2018, I felt very lonely not having Mimir on my body at that time. So I was really happy because I'm like, oh, shoot. In this game, does he get Mimir like in that capacity, like where he's on his belt talking? Mimir makes this game so great.
Yeah, the commentary, it's the little things. We said that about the 2018 one too, but the attention to detail, some of the comments that just happen as you're walking around the world, that aspect is one of those small little details that really makes God of War.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Okay, well, I think we can close down the spoiler section here. We can move on to our last couple of segments here. So, community reviews. I know that this game is a PS4 and PS5 exclusive. Josh, were you able to find some reviews left online, maybe through Metacritic or something?
I did. Actually, I had to go to Metacritic for this, but it's honestly for this game probably the best conglomeration of reviews for this. So like we always do, we've talked about the game. We've kind of given some of our thoughts, some of the overviews and stuff like that, but we always pull some reviews from people that have played the game. We always try to find some negatives and some positives. So Metacritic is where I went for these. So I will start off with a negative one. And Metacritic uses a score of 0 to 10. And then it's weird because then that translates to a score from 0 to 100 somehow. So, all right. So this person gave it a 4 and says, does what it does correctly, but the hand holding is inexcusable. The devs need to stop catering to the lowest common denominator and realize that most people can actually grasp very basic logic in puzzle solving. Prompting the player literally seconds after a small challenge presents itself is bafflingly bad.
Okay, I can kind of see what they're saying.
I agree with this one, which is why I pulled this one, because there are a lot of puzzles in God of War, and especially in Ragnarok, and they do mix up the puzzle some, which is a nice little thing too, and we didn't really talk about, but you can approach a puzzle and look at it and go, okay, I'm just going to look around, let me get the lay of the land, and 5 seconds later, Freya is like, I wonder if we could stop that water flow over there. And you're like, well, what the, come on, man.
And just the part too, where like almost every time that you're in a building or a cave or something, and there's multiple different ways to go, Atreus is always standing where you're supposed to be going. No matter what, if you're like, oh, that's the way I gotta go, I guess. Like sometimes the compass turns gold and like you don't have the pointer on there. Well, just whichever way Atreus is looking, that's the way I gotta go.
My favorite is when you're literally trying to solve the puzzle and you're doing exactly what you need to do, and then they're like, I wonder if we could do this. And it's like, yeah, Yeah, game. I'm
Yeah.
literally trying that right now. Like I didn't hit the target the first time.
I do wish there was a way to either turn it off completely or change the time. Right. Like give me like after 60 seconds, if I haven't done something, like give me a hint kind of thing. But it really dumbed the puzzles down big time, man. And I like the puzzles in this game. I think they're a nice little refresher, so.
Yeah, I love the puzzles, but I do think that the AI there, because sometimes it would wait like a minute. Sometimes I'm like, I need a clue. Can you say something? And I'll walk around in circles and stop for a few seconds. Like, please, Freya, say something. I can't figure this out, and I'm above YouTubing it.
Yeah,
and it's funny but the AI doesn't know. I wish the AI was tweaked to where it's like, okay, if someone's standing still for 60 seconds, then we'll give a clue.
Yeah. All right, this one is a 10, so this person rated it perfectly. God of War Ragnarok maximizes and perfects everything that was already great about the prequel. Storytelling, artwork, dialogue, audio, gameplay mechanics, and combat are crafted with so much love for the smallest detail. It's simply astonishing. The game is so ultra polished that it comes pretty close to perfection, and man, what an eye-opener the graphics are. One of the few real next-gen titles and one of the best games ever made. 10 out of 10.
Game's gorgeous. Can't argue with that.
Yeah, it is.
It's they get it right. I'll be honest. This is the first time I've played a PS5, by the way, because I borrowed your PS5, Paul, and I didn't even realize that they give you a performance mode and a quality mode.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, man, I tried both, but getting 60 frames a second in the performance mode was such a game changer over the little bit of extra detail in the quality mode that I played 100% of the time on performance mode, because the graphics are so good that I literally could not tell that much improvement with using quality mode on that.
Yeah,
and
I want to talk about something real fast that we didn't cover, and I'll just derail us for 1 second because it's so important. When you guys talked about God of War on that episode, you talked about the snow when you're walking through it and you see the footprints and so forth. This game amped it up a million times more. It was so realistic when you would step on the snow, the way the powder, and then you would do things like you would go to Kratos' house and the whole area is covered in snow. You'd go back again later and some of the snow is melting and the snow reacted differently. I thought that was incredible. And also, one of the things that kind of took me out of God of War 2018 is it felt like they didn't get the water quite right. They fixed that in this one. The water's incredible. So the fact they could get the quality with those things, those details they don't need to have, it's so polished.
all right, this next one is a negative. They gave it a 3. Where's the Ragnarok, though? That is the ending of the game and the ending of the Norse mythology chapter. Is this a joke? What an underwhelming and rushed ending. The characters, apart from Atreus and Kratos, don't even get a proper send-off. Where's the epic boss fights? You can't seriously make a God of War and think that 3 humanoid bosses are enough. Where's the big bosses? WTF? Now here's another reason I picked this one, because if you're going to criticize it, I think it's a valid criticism. In God of War 2018, you have the gigantic giant when you're doing the fight with Baldur and Freya, you know, and you have this epic giant thing. You've got some of these huge creatures. You have the dragon fights in 2018. Those were monumental. I will say, in Ragnarok, I felt like the boss fights were a little bit lacking.
Yeah, it's since I played 2018 after I played Ragnarok, I didn't realize that I was missing that feeling from God of War 3 that I got. In God of War 3, one of the first things you do is you're jumping on Gaia fighting like Zeus, and you're like on a Titan. You have a whole fight in like God of War 1 where you're on top of Atlas, a whole city on top of a Titan. This game had none of that. It was all humanoid bosses, and it was something I didn't realize by playing this game first. But God of War 2018 had it. Even the part when you go inside the World Serpent was kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, interesting take.
All right. And then this one, this person rated it a 10 out of 10. And it says, as a fan of the previous games, I didn't think a sequel could surpass it. Oh, how wrong I was. God of War Ragnarok ups the stakes, action, and emotion all the way up to an 11. The story and characters are phenomenal, improve upon the original in every way. The visuals are once again striking, and the action is upped thanks to new gods to fight and enemy varieties. Although the rest of the gameplay stays mostly the same, which is far from a bad thing given how smooth it was in the 2018 game. God of War Ragnarok is a triumph and shows just how games can truly be works of art and insanely fun.
So one of our minor criticisms, Josh, when we did the deep dive on 2018 is that the finisher moves were so repetitious.
Yeah.
And it was the same enemy types over and over. They absolutely fixed that in Ragnarok. Now, I take issue with anyone who says the emotions and the story are better in Ragnarok. I completely disagree. But
I'm with you.
I will say the only complaints we had about 2018, they did fix in this one. I think they created a couple new ones, but there are, instead of being like 3 finisher moves, there's a good 15 in this one where you only see the same ones a handful of times over the course of the game. That does not feel repetitious in this one at all.
There's also a better enemy variety in Ragnarok, which I did appreciate. Now, I hate some of those enemies because they're annoying to fight, but at least they had better enemy variety as well. So, and since those were very polarizing, very, very low or perfect 10s, I did actually pick and find a very middle of the road review as well. So I'm going to read that one just to kind of give a balance there between, somebody that said, hey, this game's, it's good, but it's not great, but it's not terrible either. They rated it a 6, and it says, the story is good, the worlds are mostly very fun to explore, and there are a lot of very memorable characters. The combat is great against bosses, but fighting groups of enemies, the majority of the darn game, is mostly garbage and not fun. The camera is garbage, and you'll either be spending a lot of your time trying to keep all the enemies in frame or getting shanked from off screen. I played this and 2018 on the hardest difficulty. I had fun with 2018, but did not enjoy my time with Ragnarok as much. Which goes back to what we were saying about the combat, which is, it's just good to see that we're not the only ones that thought that. But fighting swarms of enemies should not be harder than a boss fight in most situations. So,
agreed.
Yeah. All right. Okay, guys. So what we always do after this is we guess what we think the overall rating for a game is. Now, I said before the show, I knew the rating on this. I don't know if somebody was talking about it, if I was checking for video game news and just saw it in an ad or something like that. So unfortunately, I inadvertently cheated and I know the rating on this. So I'm not going to give my guess, but you two both said you have no idea what the Metacritic rating on this game is. So this is going to be between the two of you as far as the competition. So on the Metacritic scale of 0 to 100%, where do you guys think it falls?
So for a quick point of clarification, the 0 to 100 rating is from critics. The 0 to 10 rating is the user score.
Oh, right. Sorry. This would be the critics.
So we're guessing the critic score.
Correct.
All right. What you got, Michael? I think you've won more recently than me.
Do we normally guess the critic score or the user score?
Well, on Steam, it's user score, but they don't have a critic score on Steam. So
here's what always gets me, and I know we do this on purpose, is Josh goes through the reviews before we do this, because I'm always like, man, it's going to be really high. And then I hear the negatives, and I'm like, maybe it's not as high as I think. That being said,
we could do the user score, too, if you guys want. I mean, maybe we should do the user score on this, which would be the scale of 0 to 10. I didn't think about
user score is harder.
Honest. Yeah, do the user score, because that's, this is people that played the game. I think everybody's heard what the critic score is, and everybody knows it's really good. But let's go with the user score, which is 0 to 10 on a decimal scale.
All right, so I can't say 13 then.
No.
Okay, so there can't
well,
be
you
13,
can.
So.
Yeah.
I'll win.
I still believe the consensus of this game, from what I understand, just even talking to people in our Discord, is people love this game. There are going to be naysayers that are negative, so I think the score is very high. I'm going to say it's somewhere around a 9.6, to be honest with you, which might be a little lofty, but I think it's very high.
I think that's probably too high, given what I know about Metacritic. I will strategically say 9.5, but my realistic guess would be a 9.0 would be like my real guess.
All right.
You got to pick one. Strategic guess or real guess?
Oh, strategic guess. 9.5 is the official.
That's like bringing comic book characters into a video game fight.
All right. Well, Paul's strategy paid off. The actual user score on this is an 8.3. Which I find to be very, very low. There was some review bombing, which seems to happen in every game. I mean, you heard the gripes that people had for the legitimately bad reviews. But I mean, there were just a lot of people that gave it zeros because it's not any different from 2018. And so there was some review bombing on there as well. The critic score is a 94, to give you that. And then, like I said, 8.3 for the user score. So Paul, you win. Yes. Lead us into this next segment, Paul.
All right, let's do it. Let's hit that music. Dang, Freya, was your daddy a baker? Because those are the finest buns I've ever seen. All right, this segment is called Make Love, Marry, or Murder. This is where all three of us rate the game. Is this game marriage material? We highly recommend it. You should go buy it, pick it up right away. Is it make love material? Maybe it's worth waiting until it's on sale, or maybe it's worth just playing a couple hours and then moving on. Or is this game murder material? Who wants Michael? I feel like yours is the most obvious answer. Why don't you go first?
Mine's, am I always am I that transparent? It's always.
Well, you said it's. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so here's what I'll say. Okay, 2018, I agree, is a near perfect game, if not a perfect game. There's so many small criticisms that are so small that you can't say that it's not a perfect game. That being said, if we compare Ragnarok to 2018, it is inferior. 2018 is a better game, despite them polishing some of the graphics and some of the. Oh man, I just lost my train of thought there. All right, combat. That's thoughts the word I was looking for. So that's not even a hard. Thoughts are hard now. Words have only been hard. I'm gonna have to go get a test. Anyways, so if we compare to 2018, I think Ragnarok is inferior. It does some things better. It sure does. It's a great game. Mm-hmm. That being said, if we compare this game to many other games, it is an easy marry. This game is incredible. It's a very well done game. It's tons of fun. The graphics are incredible. The voice acting is over the top. Matching these characters' movements and their mannerisms to the voices that are being done is second to none on any game I've ever seen. The game is incredible. So yeah, I'm not comparing this game to 2018, even though, excuse me, it sounds like every single review out there is being like, oh, it's just more of the same. Yeah, but more of the same is really freaking good. This game was awesome. So I'm marrying the game.
Yeah, I would almost say exactly the same thing of everything you just said, Michael. I think it's absolutely inferior to 2018, but it's still fantastic. If 2018 did not exist, I might be saying this is a perfect game and I might not have any complaints. It just speaks to how good 2018 is, that you can nitpick the more minor things, especially in regards to story. There's no way I'm going to try to get too cute and try to argue it's somehow make love or anything like that. It's a marry. It's a fantastic game. Everyone should play it. It's worth the $70 price, which is hefty, but everyone out there should buy it and play it if you have a PS5. I'm sure some people will buy a PS5 just to play it sooner than later. But yeah, it's definitely marriage material. Marry all the way.
All right, so for me, this is an easy marry. Everybody knew I was going to love this game, and I do. Sure. I absolutely love it. Everybody wants to know, is it better than 2018? How does it compare to 2018's? That kind of stuff. For me, this is your bigger, better sequel that shoots for the moon and kind of gets into orbit, but doesn't quite hit the moon, right? It misses the magic of 2018's God of War. That small quest of it's just, hey, this is just a father and a son trying to get to a mountain and what happens along the way. This is, we want everything to be grand and amazing and showdowns and all this stuff. And while it succeeds in a lot of that, part of going so grand is that you miss the intimate stuff. And so I will say that Ragnarok on its own is practically a perfect video game. I mean, I cannot think of another game in recent memory that I have loved more than Ragnarok. Is it better than 2018? It doesn't need to be. You know what I mean? It stands on its own. It does its own thing. If I had to pick one and say, this is the one I'm going to play for the rest of my life, I'm probably going to pick 2018 because it's got that magic and that mystery to it and that innocence that you don't have with Ragnarok. But man, is Ragnarok great, dude. That's
so much
the
fun.
Takeaway. That really is. You know what I mean? Is it's like, it does some things better. It does some things worse. You're never going to regret playing this game. Like, that's the answer.
I have an easy film comparison to what you just said as far as the intimacy of the first game and going too grand. It's like the original Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy to me. The very first movie stood alone. It was great. You got lots of Jack Sparrow and Miss Turner and of course Jeffrey Rush. I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request. Means no. You get a lot of that stuff from it, and it's really good for character development. But the sequels decide to involve the entire freaking world, and it just doesn't land enough because you don't have enough. You're trying to do too much. And I think that that's an easy comparison where, like, okay, we tried to bite off more than we could really do, and it was a great game. It was lots of fun, but like Paul said, maybe this should have been 2 games.
I will say this. There was a moment right near the very end where I was trying to formulate my thoughts on Ragnarok versus the 2018 and stuff like that. And I just remember thinking, this is the most epic video game that I think I've ever played. Like, in that sense, I can shake my head and say, I feel like I am playing like like an Oscar-winning game almost. Like, this game is going to win a ton of awards. It's the most epic experience I think I've ever had in that regard. It just doesn't have the magic that 2018 had. So it's like, take that for what you will. You know what I mean? As far as that goes, because people want to say, oh, well, which one's better? And it's like, they're just different in my opinion.
Yeah, it's kind of like a forest and trees analogy, right? Like, this is a much bigger forest than 2018, but you're kind of losing the element of the individual tree in Ragnarok.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was fun with metaphors with Paul.
That's the new segment. Right. All right. Well, obviously we knew this show was going to go pretty long, but let's go ahead and move on to our leaderboard and see where this game stacks up. Okay, if anyone out there is new to the idea of our leaderboard, we have on our website, multiplayerpodcast.com, a list of every game we have done a deep dive of. We currently are sitting at a list of 83 games. We will now have 84 after adding Ragnarok. And as a 3-person consensus, we have to figure out where to place this game in relation to all the others. This ends up meaning we're not just comparing it to 2018 God of War, we're also going to try to compare it to games like Rust and Valheim and Elden Ring and Outer Wilds, all these games that are vastly different, even different genres. It's part of the fun of what we do here. So as a 3-person team, the fact that we all married God of War Ragnarok, I assume it's safe to say it's in our top 20, right?
I would say top 70 at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Top 70 for sure.
Helping you guys out.
Yeah, I think top 20 is safe to say, and I think we're all saying it would be lower than 2018, right? So we're looking somewhere in that 3 to 20 range. Is that what we would say?
I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there that I think this is super comparable to God of War in its enjoyableness. If nothing else, like this, I had crazy amounts of fun playing this game. I mean, for me, it's a top 10 game easily.
I concur. I'll easily put it in the top 10.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking at the list, I could be talked into something as high as 7, where we would put it above Apex, Rocket League, Valheim, Satisfactory. But I could also be talked into putting it as low as 14, putting it below Divinity Original Sin 2 and Elden Ring. So that was kind of my thoughts. So you're both just a little bit higher on it than me. What do you guys think?
I mean, I would put it at number 3 personally, because I think it's that good. I mean, does it reach, like, again, everybody's going to compare it, right? Does it reach God of War? Like, no, but it's like a 1A and a 1B kind of thing. And where it does some things better, it does other things worse. But
wow,
I mean,
over Disco and Cyberpunk, huh?
I freaking loved Ragnarok, man. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it was more of the same. And I know that I'm higher on God of War than probably both of you guys. So it's a little bit of personal bias there as well. But I mean, if we're saying God of War is number 2, and I think Ragnarok is just about as good and in some ways a little bit better, then I'm going to put it at number 3.
I am much closer to Josh than I am to Paul. I have a very hard time with number 5 when I try to rank this, because Disco Elysium, again, much smaller scale, much more simplified artwork and character movement, stuff like that. But the story was absolutely engaging and enticing, and I loved it. There's so much more in God of War Ragnarok, but Disco Elysium is a perfect role-playing game. So, how do you do it? So I could go on either side of Disco Elysium. I don't know if I'd put this one above Cyberpunk, just because the ambition in Cyberpunk was something I don't think I've ever seen in a video game. Overwatch obviously is Overwatch. It's an incredible game that united so many different genres to make someone like me want to play a shooter. It belongs there. I would definitely swap 1 and 2. I think God of War might be the best game I've ever played. I think Cyberpunk might be number 2 behind that. So that's why the top 3 I can't touch. But putting it in front of Disco Elysium, I would take an argument on before or after Disco Elysium, and that's where I think it needs to go.
Let's go one after, just for the sake of a little bit of diversity. Instead of having 2 God of Wars top 5, if you feel you could go either way, now let's put it right below. Let's put it below Disco.
I got an idea, guys.
Oh,
I got an idea.
No.
What if we put
That's not
God
this
of
episode.
War
That's not this episode.
number 1?
No.
Michael, buzzer, buddy.
The best game Michael's ever played is the last one he played. We're not putting it above Red Dead Redemption 2.
So where do you want to put it?
And the funniest thing is the best game I ever played before was Cyberpunk. Right
Michael
after we played
did say that on the Cyberpunk episode.
That's true.
I did.
All right, so you're saying put it at number 6?
Let's do it at 6.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too.
So now our top 6 will be Red Dead 2, God of War 2018, Overwatch, Cyberpunk, Disco Elysium, then God of War Ragnarok,
Fine,
then Rust, and everything else.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, when the top 5 should say God of War, Cyberpunk, Disco Elysium, Overwatch, Red Dead Redemption 2.
All right, well, at least you've got like 5 out of the same games.
It's 5 same games. I mean, I didn't obtusely put Elite Dangerous up there, so
I'm fine with that. I think
enough.
that's it's a good spot for it.
Okay, so my reordering works. That's great.
No.
Yeah, and it's interesting that all of us have it rated above Elden Ring, and yet all of us think Elden Ring will win Game of the Year. Is that just our perception of what other people think?
I think Elden Ring deserves to be a top 10 game personally, but I think some of that was we were referencing the difficulty curve. A lot of people aren't going to like how hard Elden Ring was and stuff like that. It's not going to, God of War is going to appeal to more
broader
people
audience?
Once it's available to a broader audience, I think. Like when Ragnarok comes to PC, I think you're going to find that more people like Ragnarok than people liked Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a game of the year because it did so much over what the Dark Souls format is probably
it innovated
going
its own
to
genre.
win. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
In that regard.
Because Dark Souls games created their own genre, essentially. That's why we call it Dark Souls games, like other games that are like those Dark Souls like. And that game innovated that. My thing about Elden Ring versus this game is Elden Ring feels a lot more like a one-trick pony. Like there's no story at all.
It's up for best narrative, Michael. What are you talking about?
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But that's the thing, though, is like there's no character. Like you don't have character movement on their faces. It's just all combat, and it's incredible at that. And it did innovate. Man, it's tough. It sounds like I'm almost talking to myself into believing God of War Ragnarok will win a Game of the Year when I think it's going to be Elden Ring.
Yeah, I think probably Elden Ring. I think that there will be enough people like us who think it was a little bit of a step down overall. Because I would say combat is 10% better, but I would say story is 40% worse. And so it's still fantastic. I would give 2018 a 10 out of 10. I would give this one a 9 out of 10. Like, it's still fantastic. It's way, way, way up there. So, all right. Well, if anyone out there wants to look at our full leaderboard, again, that's multiplayerpodcast.com. It's right there on the main page. Just scroll down a little bit there. And obviously, we've been going for well over an hour and a half, guys. We could keep going, but I think this is a good stopping place. We do want to say thank you to everyone out there for listening. A very special thank you to Patreon supporters, especially legendary supporters Redletter and Remi, and epic supporters AceofShame, Yoda, Papa Thunderfist, and Wayne01. If you want to join their ranks, please visit multiplayersquad.com. And if you guys want a head start on the next deep dive that'll release 2 weeks from now, we will be covering the third-person cowboy action game Evil West. Also, you can follow us on socials at MultiplayerPod. We hope that you guys out there enjoyed Ragnarok as much as we did. Next Thursday, when we release our next episode, we hope you'll join us for that one as well. And until then, happy gaming.
Cheers, all.
All right. See you, everybody.